There may have been a handful of things to dislike about Gonzaga's final home game of 2024, but hey, at least Graham Ike's performance was not one of them.
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, y'all? Happy Monday, happy Christmas week, and welcome into the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Andy Patton, here to bring you news and updates on all things Zag athletics. Today's episode of Locked On Zags is brought to you by FanDuel. Folks, place your first $5 bet, and you will get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win. Just visit FanDuel.com today to get started. Well, Gonzaga heads into Christmas, coming off a 21-point win over Bucknell on Saturday. We're going to examine the good from that game, including Graham Ike's great performance. We're also going to talk about the not-so-good things. Another slow start for the Zags, some disappointment from the transfers again as well. We're also going to close out the show talking about a 1-1 weekend to start WCC play for Lisa Fortier and the Zag women's team. A frustrating loss to San Francisco, but they rebounded with a win over San Diego. We'll talk about what we saw and what's going on with that team heading into the new year. We start with Gonzaga's win over Bucknell on Saturday. Again, the final home game of the year 2024 for Mark Few's program. 86-65, a 21-point win for the Zags. They're 9-3 now on the year, are perfect still at home. We'll talk about the good, the bad from that game. We'll also examine our 5 keys that we laid out prior to the game, what we saw, what we didn't see from those keys, what it means for the team going forward. We'll start with the good, and that's Graham Ike. What a phenomenal performance from Graham when the Zags just really needed it. They'd have won this game without a good performance from Graham, although it probably wouldn't have been a very fun one to watch. A lot of this game wasn't all that fun to watch, even with a strong performance from Graham. But of all the things that we really wanted to see go right for Gonzaga heading into, one more non-conference game, a big one against UCLA, and then, of course, conference play getting started just 2 days after that, heading into the new year, heading into conference play, the stretch run prior to March. There's a handful of things I think we really want to and need to see from this team, but I don't know if any of them were more significant than Graham Ike starting to look like himself. And we've seen good performances from Graham this year that are followed up by not so good performances. So I don't think we can just say, well, good, let's wash our hands of this whole discourse and say that Graham Ike is fine now because he had a great game against a not very good team. But it certainly helps that Ike went out, had 25 points. He had 10 rebounds. He was 11 of 15 from the field, incredibly efficient. That has been the big knock on Graham. He's had some high-scoring performances this year where he played well in one half, not so well in another half, or even high-scoring performances where he still missed quite a few shots, just got a lot of attempts, or he still had a bunch of turnovers, things like that. This game really didn't have any of those issues. He had 4 fouls. That's the one issue, 4 fouls in 20 minutes. Obviously, that remains an issue. It was an issue last year. It's an issue this year. I don't know that that's randomly going to just go away. He clearly needs to have a little bit more discipline, especially after he's already picked up a foul. He struggles with that. That's still there. And again, I don't know that that's necessarily going to just disappear this season, but the fact that he didn't have a bunch of turnovers, he just had the one, the fact that he didn't miss a bunch of bunnies, he even knocked down a 3-pointer in this game. He was 1 of 2 from 3. I like that he's being a little bit more willing to take those. He's not bombing a whole bunch of them, and nor should he be, but when teams don't honor him at all and let him be wide open from 3, I think he should be taking those shots. And we've seen that this year where he's got a decent percentage because he's taking good-looking 3-point shots. So I'm glad to see that from him. He just had the 1 assist, but he also had a steal and a block in this game. Really, again, outside of the fouls, a much-needed quality performance from Graham Ike. On a day where Braden Huff was fine. It wasn't that Braden played bad. It's that he wasn't all that needed. And really, the key for this team outside of Graham Ike was not Braden Huff, but it was the other backup big man, Ben Gregg. Ben Gregg had a great game and really, I think, helped Gonzaga start to work on that zone offense, which is still an area of that this team needs to improve and work on. And I think teams are going to start playing more of it against them. Teams that have it in the bag, that are outmatched otherwise, are going to turn to a zone to see if they can potentially beat Gonzaga that way. And there are some pretty easy reasons to believe that that might be the case. But I thought what Ben Gregg did in this game really was valuable for the team. He was 15 points in 20 minutes off the bench. He was 6 of 12 from the field, so not super efficient. He took 7 3-pointers, but he made 3 of them. Not only is that a good percentage, it's also the same number of threes that he'd made the entire rest of the season up to this point. So through the first 11 games of the season, Ben Gregg had made 3 threes. And then in this one game against Bucknell, he also made 3 threes, now shooting 22% on the year. Is 37.7% each of the last 2 years. Obviously, these players don't exist in a vacuum, but the odds of him shooting closer to 37% when all is said and done at the end of the year are fairly high. And in that case, that probably means he's going to shoot it pretty well from here on out. Again, no guarantee on that stretch, but I wouldn't be surprised to see Ben Gregg shoot the 3 a lot better the second half of the year than he has in the first half. And that's great news for the Zags. It's also great news for their zone offense, because not only can Ben shoot the 3 and shoot over that zone effectively, but he's very good at running that baseline and kind of filling that valuable role as a scorer down on the baseline. He's also very good at getting offensive rebounds, which one of the best ways to beat the zone is not only to just get out in transition, which Gonzaga did well in this game as well, but also crash the offensive glass. Teams struggle to rebound out of a zone defense. And if Gonzaga is going to take a lot more 3-point shots and be, potentially inconsistent as a 3-point shooting team against zones, if you crash the glass, get offensive rebounds, get second chance opportunities, that's going to force the other team to pull out of that zone, even if it's effectively limiting Gonzaga's ability to score on those first opportunities. Shout out to Nolan Hickman as well. 14 points for him, 4 of 8 shooting from 3. Really needed to see the ball go through the net a couple of times for Nolan in this one. He had a good game against Nicholls State as well. So 2 good games this week for Nolan, coming off of that disappearing act in New York against the UConn Huskies. So nice to see a veteran guy like Nolan. You kind of figured he'd find his way back. Like, players like that don't typically just disappear for long stretches, and they tend to rebound well from poor performances. And that was the case for Nolan against Nicholls, and then here again against Bucknell with his 4 made threes. He also had 3 assists and no turnovers in this game. And the Zags shot it pretty well from 3. Not great, 34% from 3. That's not elite by any stretch. And they took 35 of them, which again, Bucknell was running this really soft zone that just was really leaving Gonzaga pretty open from 3. I think you'd like to see a little better percentage than that, but 12 made threes, 4 of them from Hickman, who you really needed to have a good game, 3 of them from Gregg, who needed to kind of come back from that, I think is pretty solid. You'd like to see Battle and Stromer shoot it better. They were each 1 of 4 in this game, but that's not the biggest concern for me. I think with Battle, at least, he's just a streaky shooter. With Stromer, he was like 52% through the first 8 games of the year. You kind of knew some regression was coming in that spot. So for Ben to have that positive regression back towards his career norm, and Dusty to have a little bit of a regression the other way, that all feels like it makes sense to me. And ultimately, in a game where Gonzaga needed to shoot a lot of threes because that's what the defense was giving them, I'll take 35% on 35 attempts. That's going to get it done most of the time. The not so good stuff, we're going to talk more about Michael Ajayi in the second segment. He didn't score in this game. He didn't make much of an impact in this game. Again, we'll get to it a little bit later, but that is a pretty glaring thing that remains an issue for Gonzaga as we get closer and closer to conference play. Speaking of the new transfers, Caleb Battle wasn't great in this game either. And it's not even that he played super poorly. It feels like Gonzaga doesn't really know how to feature him in the zone offense. He had 6 points in this game. He was 2 of 6 from the field. He was 1 of 4 from 3, which means he only took 2 2-point attempts. He only had 2 free throws. He was 1 of 2 from the free throw. He's now missed a free throw in 3 straight games. Not overly concerned about Caleb Battle's free throw shooting, is going to be fine. But the issue for me is that this is one of the best downhill scorers in college basketball. Going to his right, driving to the basket, there is arguably nobody better in the sport. At least he's right in the top of that conversation. And Mark Few had kind of said this before the season, that they've never really had a player like Battle. And what is standing out to me is it doesn't seem like they quite know how to utilize him yet. There is some optimism behind that statement, because it means that if they can figure it out, that could really be problematic for opposing teams. I think some of this was the zone. I think the Zags didn't really know what to do with Caleb Battle in a zone offense, because they like getting him actions where he's coming off screens and going downhill, and that doesn't work as well against a zone. And I understand that. I understand why Battle's skill set is not as readily available to the Gonzaga offense when they're facing a zone. But you can't just not feature your leading scorer and a guy you brought in to score the basketball. You can't just kind of sideline him every time you face a zone. That's not an option for this team. So they're going to have to figure out better ways to utilize Battle's skill set than just having him shoot threes over a zone when throughout his entire career, he's been a fairly inconsistent three-point shooter. That's not the answer. And I'm hoping that this next week, getting into conference play, the Zags will figure out what the answer to that is, because he needs to be more featured against zones than he was in this game. We kind of already touched on the zone offense being an issue, just settling for too many shots. I honestly feel strongly that the loss of Steel Venters is significant with regards to Gonzaga's zone offense, because not only is Steel Venters obviously an incredible standstill three-point shooter, which is why he was brought to this team 2 years ago and why it's frustrating that this team hasn't shot very well the last couple of years, because we know that that's the skill set that he possesses, but he's also very good at cutting to the basket and moving without the ball. And I think having him in a zone offense where he can move without the ball, cut to the hoop, also force defenders all the way out on him in the perimeter really would be valuable. I'm not saying that the Zags, that's an excuse for the Zags to not have a very fully fleshed out zone offense. They still need to figure out why that's not a strength of theirs right now. But I do think that Venter's specific skill set would be really valuable in a zone offense. And it's unfortunate they don't have him. A couple other not so great things in this game. The defense, particularly against the big man for Bucknell, Noah Williamson, was pretty terrible early in the game. It got better in the second half. They really put the clamps on him in the second half, but he still finished this game with 16 points. 7 of 13 doesn't look too bad, but he, again, very good defense in the second half on him, not good in the first half. He was also 6 of 8 on two-pointers, just too easy for him to score around the rim in this game. And the Zags were also only 6 of 9 from the free throw line. Again, the percentage doesn't bother me as much as we only got 9 attempts at home against an inferior opponent. Again, that's a product of the zone being effective and Gonzaga settling for too many outside shots instead of putting the ball on the deck, trying to get to the rim and trying to get to the free throw line. Well, I said we're going to talk about Michael Ajayi a little bit more. That is what's going to talk about next, Michael Ajayi's performance. We wanted to see some more from Emmanuel Innocente in this game as well. We'll talk about what happened with those two in this game and a few other things all coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you're paying for twice? That definitely happened to me. I had a few subscriptions that I didn't even realize I was still paying for, and Rocket Money made it so easy to track them all down. It's kind of like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you cancel your subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, spending habits, even the goals that you want to hit this year. Rocket Money currently has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 per year when using all of the app's premium features. So cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. All right, folks, segment 2, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast, still here recapping Gonzaga's win over the Bucknell Bison on Saturday, bringing them up to 9-3 on the year. Their second to last non-conference game of the season before they take on the UCLA Bruins at the Intuit Dome on Saturday, on December 28th. I'm going to go through the keys that we laid out prior to this game against Bucknell. Again, when facing opponents like this, the keys tend to shift more towards things we want to see, things we're hoping to see, questions we want to have answered, as opposed to just like, here's something that Gonzaga needs to do to win this game. We did talk about a few things that we just wanted to see from Gonzaga because we haven't seen them much this year. And unfortunately, most of those things didn't really happen at the level that we wanted to see them against this Bucknell team. Key number 1 was to start hot. I said it on the show on Friday. I want to see Gonzaga up 10 at the first media timeout. They were up 3. I want to see Gonzaga put this team away so early in the game that by the second media timeout, by 10 minutes in the first half, we already got Gregg and Dan and the broadcasting crew trying to figure out what to talk about because this thing is over. That didn't happen. It's happened very few times this year. It happened against UMass Lowell. That's kind of it, really. I mean, this team has struggled early out of the gate. Baylor, obviously, they were phenomenal in that game, but really, for the most part, slow starts to the beginning of the game and slow starts in the second half have been a huge issue for the Zags. They started out hot in that Kentucky game, but really didn't play well, not only in the first part of the second half, but really the entire second half against the Wildcats team. But for this game, Graham Ike scored Gonzaga's first 9 points. They were up 9-3. Great. They were also down 14-12. They just could not pull away. Noah Williamson had a great first half for Bucknell. The Zags offense was stagnant and just a little lethargic, and they tried to get out in transition, and they succeeded at times, but they just didn't play all that well at the start of this game. They were at 11 points at halftime. They win by 21 points. The second half, they outscore them by 10. Bucknell scores more points in the second half, but that was kind of because the ball was just getting up and down the floor a little bit faster. Like, I'm not really concerned about – I thought the second half performance was fine, even if the margin of victory for Gonzaga was not super huge in that second half. But I just want to see them put the skids on somebody right away, and they really haven't been able to do that this year. Credit to still getting a 20-point victory. Again, they beat Nichols by 30. If you'd said last week, all right, they're going to come out of this week with a 30-point win over one team and a 21-point win over the other, I think you'd feel fine with that. Like, you might feel like, oh, they should probably beat both these teams like 25, whatever. At that point, you're getting nitpicky. But the fact that they still can't play well in the first 5 to 10 minutes of a game is just really frustrating, and it would be a problem if that continues against UCLA this weekend. Key number 2, really wanted to see this a get-right game for Michael Ajayi. He's been so inconsistent this year, and really it's not even that he's had, half his games have been great and half his games have been bad. He's had a few good games, but otherwise just really hasn't been a particularly impactful player for Gonzaga. And he's in the starting lineup, but Ben is frequently playing more minutes than him coming off the bench. Ben's scoring more points, getting more rebounds or a similar amount of rebounds. Like, the player that we know Michael Ajayi is, the player he was at Pepperdine last year, the player Mark Few talked about him being coming into the year one of the best rebounders they've ever had. He hasn't been that guy. And in this game, it really, really stood out. He's had some poor performances this year, but he didn't even score in this game against Bucknell. 0 points, 0 of 4 shooting. Every one of his attempts was a three-pointer. Again, that's not how the Zags should be utilizing Michael Ajayi. And some of this falls on the coaching staff. Some of it falls on him. Just settling for three-point shots when your three-point shot is broken right now. I think it'll come back. I don't think Michael's whatever he's been shooting this season, I think like 17% or something like that from the three-point line. Like, he's probably not that bad going forward this season. I'm almost positive he won't be. But why is that the only shot he's taken? Why aren't we trying to get to the rim? Why aren't we trying to do more things? Why isn't he being he had 5 rebounds in this game, so it's not like he was completely, 5 rebounds in 17 minutes is pretty good, but just not contributing nearly at the level we wanted to. We didn't expect him to be 17 and 10 like he was at Pepperdine, but this has been tough. He's now scored 6 or less points in 4 of his last 5 games. The only game in that stretch where he scored more than 6 points was against UConn when he had 14. Ajayi hasn't made a three-pointer since the West Virginia game. Since that time, he's 0 for 9 from 3. In his last 5 games, which is that stretch where he's 6 or less, except for that game against UConn, he's averaging 5.6 points, 4.2 boards, shooting 69% on two-pointers. That's great. Shooting 0% on threes, like we said. 85% from the free throw line, great. On the season, 6.9 points per game, 5.3 boards, less than an assist, less than a steal. Again, 57% on twos, but 16% from 3. It feels like he is not being utilized the way that he is capable. I think a lot of this is him not being comfortable in the offense. You still see that. You still see him kind of either know what he's going to do as soon as he catches the ball. I'm going to catch the ball, I'm immediately going to swing it. Or I'm going to catch the ball and I'm immediately going to make an entry pass. And it's telegraphing and the other team can tell what's going on. He's hesitant to shoot. Like, he just doesn't look comfortable. I think this will change. I really do. But it has been hard to watch. And this felt like a game that was a great opportunity for him to really get to feel a little freer and feel a little bit more comfortable and get out there and do what he's capable of doing. And it didn't happen. And I think of all the things about this game to be frustrated about, that is right up there, along with not getting off to a good start, that has just continued to be a problem for Gonzaga this year. Key number 3 was hoping to see more of Emmanuel Innocente in this game. Didn't happen. He played 3 minutes. That's it. He got 3 rebounds. He missed his 1 shot attempt. That was it. For him, Innocente, he played 15 minutes against UMass Lowell. He played 13 minutes against Long Beach State. He played 9 minutes against Davidson. Other than that, hasn't played much. 3 minutes each against Nichols and Bucknell. Those are 2 games he should have played more. And it's not that Mark Few made a mistake. It's that the Zags didn't build a big enough lead for him to feel comfortable putting him in the game. Mark Few has always been pretty conservative about emptying his bench. Even in game like this game was decided in the second half. There was, Bucknell, I think, got within 13 at one point, but it never really felt like Bucknell was going to win this game or even come all the way back. But it was close enough that Mark Few wanted to continue to keep Dusty out there and Caliph and Nolan and those guys, and didn't allow for Innocente to play more minutes. It's not a huge deal, but I would like to see him get some of that run. I'm hoping we'll get to see more of it in WCC play because he's going to be a big part of this team next year. And the more opportunities he can play this year, the better. Key number 4 was defensive communication. I thought the Zags were fine here. Again, they really struggled against Williamson in the first half, but overall, Bucknell didn't shoot it great. They're about 50% on 2-pointers. That's not great. You'd like to hold them a little better than that, especially a team that's historically not a great offensive team, but they did hold them to 32% from 3, 31 attempts for Bucknell. They made 10 of them. So it's actually pretty similar to how Gonzaga shot, but Gonzaga made a few more, took a few more. It wasn't Gonzaga's strongest defensive effort, not their worst either, but they do need to clean up some of the stuff, some of the screen stuff, some of the other things against this UCLA team that runs a lot of actions, lots of ball screens, lots of high-low stuff. Gonzaga is going to need to be really on their game defensively if they want to win that game on Saturday. And then key number 5, we were hoping to see some more of the end of the bench players. It wasn't really a thing. Ismaila Diani did not play. The 2 walk-ons not named Joe Few, Joaquin Reyes-Moore, and Noah Holland did not play. We did see Jun Sukio for 3 minutes, and he played well in his 3 minutes. He had 5 points and a rebound. He was 2 of 3 from the field, including knocking down a 3-pointer. He did have a turnover and a pair of fouls, but we're talking about 3 minutes at the end of the game. Not a big deal. Fun to see him get out there and make some shots. Joe Few played 2 minutes as well, missed his shot attempt and dished out an assist. Again, hopefully some more opportunities in conference play to see a few more of these guys, to maybe see Holland score his first points, to see Q go out and score some points like he did earlier in the season. But would like to have seen that here against Nichols or Bucknell, but alas, that was not in the cards for the Zags to close out 2024. Well, the Zag women split their first road trip of conference play. They lost badly to San Francisco to start 0-1, but then rebounded by knocking off San Diego on the road. 1-1 in WCC play. We're going to talk about what it means for this program coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, get ready to tackle the college hoops action this season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and you will get $150 in bonus bets if you win. And the FanDuel Sportsbook app currently gives you everything you need to place live bets all in one place. When you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out their latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more, all on that same page where you place your bets. And Mark Few's team still has really high odds to win the national championship, plus 1,400. They've dropped a bit. They're behind Auburn at plus 600, Duke at plus 900, and then Tennessee at 1,100, and Houston at 1,200. Somehow Gonzaga ahead of ahead of UConn, ahead of Kentucky, ahead of UCLA, ahead of a lot of the other teams that they have played or will play this season. If you like those odds, if you like the game odds as we get closer to the game against UCLA, just visit FanDuel.com to join today. As a reminder, you will get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, folks, closing out the show, talking about the weekend for the Gonzaga women's basketball team. Starting off WCC play with the road trip to San Francisco and San Diego. The Zags split those 2 games, first falling to San Francisco by 15 points, 73-58 was the final score in this one. The Zags fell to 5-7 on the year. We're 0-1, of course, in conference play. And it was a lot of the same stories we've seen from this team. In fact, both teams, even though Gonzaga won the second game, both games kind of had a similar story. Yvonne Ejim, fantastic. Rest of the team, just not doing enough. Too many turnovers, not enough three-point shots, bench depth, just a lot of the same issues. In this game against San Francisco, Yvonne had 20 points. She had 5 boards and 2 blocks. She played 34 minutes. She was 6 of 9 on 2-point attempts. She missed her 2 3-point attempts and went 8 of 10 from the free throw line. But Gonzaga as a team was really, really struggled from the field, 35.2% from the field, and they were 7 of 28, 25% from 3, just brick after brick after brick. Team had 13 assists and 17 turnovers. They were out-rebounded 40-28. Meanwhile, the Dons shot 47.8%. When you look at that data, getting out rebounded, turning the ball over a bunch, missing a bunch of threes, letting the other team shoot nearly 40 or 50%. It's almost surprising that it was only a 15-point game. This was really not a strong performance from Lisa Fortier's team. It was tough to see. If there is some good news, Taylor Dalton returned. She had made her debut with Gonzaga. She's a 4-year starter at St. Mary's, transferred to Gonzaga this offseason, has been dealing with an injury. She's still kind of working her way back. She played just 13 minutes in this first game. She had 2 points, 2 boards, and 2 steals. Hopefully, as she gets more comfortable, gets back into game shape, gets more comfortable playing, that will be a boost for the Zags because they could use all the help that they can get with this team. Like we said, they did respond by getting a 66-59 win over the Toreros of San Diego. Yvonne, once again, 29 points, 8 boards, 3 steals. She was 10 of 20 from the field. She was 9 of 15 from the free throw line. On the season, Ejim is now averaging 20.5 points per game, 8.2 boards, 2.7 assists, and 1.1 steals in about 31 minutes per game. She's shooting 59.5% on 2-pointers. She's shooting 30% from 3, about 72% from the free throw line. Legit playing like she might win back-to-back Becky Hammon Mid-Major Player of the Year awards, playing like an All-American. But again, those awards are often on some level based on your team performance. And if Gonzaga continues to not perform very well, it's going to be a lot harder for her to be in those conversations, despite the fact that her performance is very clearly at that level thus far this season. The Zags won this game against San Diego. That's the good news. Yvonne Ejim played great. That's the other good news. But man, there's not a lot of other things to really like about this performance. I thought I misread the box score. The Zags had 27 turnovers in this game. Now, San Diego had 17, but 27 that is an astonishing number of turnovers in a single game. The Zags were also only just 4 of 8 from 3. You love 50%. You don't love 4 of 8. San Diego only made 3, and they took 17. Again, if you're going to beat a team by turning the ball over 27 times, there's a pretty good chance the other team didn't shoot it very well, and that is the case for Gonzaga. And again, that's credit to Gonzaga's defense. It's not just that San Diego was bricking shots. Gonzaga played well defensively. They got turnovers on their own, but man, 27 turnovers. They needed every single thing they got from Yvonne to win this basketball game. The Zags only had 11 points off the bench. 5 of them were from Taylor Dalton. She played 21 minutes in this game, so we're starting to see already her get a little bit more playing time as the years go, as she gets back into game shape. McKinley Dowling, the transfer from Minnesota, had 6. That's it. Inez Betancourt had 5 turnovers, did not score coming off the bench. This team is just, the depth right now is not where it needs to be. And the turnovers are an issue. The 3-point shooting is an issue. The consistency is a major issue. And there's a lot of work to be done for this team to get back to the NCAA tournament, to get back towards the top of the WCC standings. You know, again, just getting Dalton healthy. Hopefully there's some more good injury news coming their way, but really, really rough start to the entire season for this women's team and a tough start to conference play. And they're fortunate to be 1-1 right now as opposed to being 0-2. What's next for the Lady Zags? They host Oregon State, the Beavers, the first WCC home game of the season for Lisa Fortier's team. This game is on Saturday at 1 p.m. on ESPN2. Was so excited for what was looking like another big Zag day on Saturday. Women's team on ESPN2 at 1 and the men's game against UCLA at 5. Except they have now moved the time of the men's game. We talked about this last week for those of you who missed it. Gonzaga's game against UCLA on Saturday will be at 1 p.m. as well. So both these games going on at the same time. Got to split screen that bad boy. It's kind of unfortunate that that's the reality of how this schedule now shakes out because of that, but still a good opportunity to see this women's team taking on an Oregon State team that I totally get why this game's on ESPN. Gonzaga made the NCAA tournament last they've been very consistently in the tournament. They have one of the best players in the country in Yvonne Ejim. They have been a team that's worthy of being on ESPN pretty regularly. Meanwhile, Oregon State coming off an Elite 8 appearance last year. It's the first marquee conference game for the Beavers. They've only played one other conference opponent, that was Pacific. Yet, this game is not shaping up to be what ESPN and anybody else would have thought that it was going to be when they scheduled this thing, because the Beavers are only 4-8. On the year. The Zags are now 6-7, 1-1 in conference play. The Beavers are 4-8, 0-1 in conference play, with their loss being to Pacific on the road, 66-63. This team has also lost to Colorado State. They lost to Arizona State, Illinois, Minnesota. They lost to UConn. You can accept that. Irvine and Miami. This team they're just nowhere close to what they were when they made the Elite 8. And that's understandable. It's basically a completely new roster. They knew that they were moving, of course, from the Pac-12 to the WCC. And in women's basketball, the Pac-12 was an incredibly strong conference, and so many players didn't want to stick around for the move to the WCC. They hit the transfer portal. They had some graduations. They kept their coach, Scott Ruck, who's fantastic at what he does, but completely new roster moving into a new conference. This team just hasn't been able to carry that momentum. I feel for Oregon State fans. It's a frustrating thing to see your program get stripped away by something that was not your fault in any capacity, but that's just the nature of college athletics in the modern era. The Beavers shooting 22% as a team from the 3-point line. They average over 18 turnovers per game. This is not a very good team. They're still finding themselves. They're still getting everything together. It's kind of similar to what's going on with the Gonzaga team as well. So this should be an interesting game. Again, does not have the cachet that certainly ESPN wanted it to when they scheduled it, but it's still two teams that are kind of struggling, but are still expected to finish towards the top of the WCC, which probably says a little bit more about the strength of women's basketball in the WCC than anything, but would still be great to see Coach Fortier's team get a win at home to close out the year 2024, beat this Oregon State team, start to carry a little momentum into the year 2025. Again, we'll be split screening those two games on Saturday. Going to wrap it up for me today here on the Locked On Zags podcast. We'll be back. We're going to have shows this week every day except Thursday. We're going to take Christmas Day off from recording, so no show on Thursday, but expect a show on Christmas Eve, and of course, a show on Friday getting you ready for that big-time game against the Bruins on Saturday. Lots of fun stuff coming your way here on Locked On Zags to close out the year. Thanks again for listening, folks, and until next time, as always, go Zags.